Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to talk about visually making sense of complex rhythms, part 2, because I made another video in the past. And this is from a real student's music, and we've gone over these rhythms some. They are very complex, and I thought it would just be helpful to go over the thinking behind, again, how you even make sense of what's going on. It's a piece called Departures from the anime Guilty Crown, apparently. And I'm not going to try to like literally teach how to play this. I'm not even going to tap the rhythms or anything like that or snap them like in other videos. I more want to try to teach the thinking that's involved around how you even approach something like this. So don't be worried if I show you the rhythms or start explaining it and you're like, I don't have any idea what he's talking about, or I don't think that that's possible for me to do. It's more about like the actual problem solving, critical thinking part of it, right? It could be much simpler rhythms that you're approaching, but you might use some of these types of thinking in order to solve some of your problems. So I'm just gonna go right in, right? So here's the first example here, and we're just looking basically at this part. I mean, right? It's like what even is going on here. Now, I made another video about the 4/3 polyrhythm, which is one of the most common polyrhythms that can exist. And I think definitely you should just watch that so that you have some reference. Once you have some idea of how to do that, this will make more sense, right? So when I see this, the first thing I want to do, or I guess all these things weren't here originally, right? I look at this, I'm like, we don't even know initially how to make sense of this. But what I do see is that there's a triplet figure here and that things are matching up in a weird way. So I think like, oh, could this be like a 3/2 polyrhythm? Could this be a 4/3 polyrhythm? Because those are pretty common rhythms. I know how to do those. So I have to try to convert this into something that I know, right? So I see like, oh, there's two 32nd notes there and a 16th note. So let me think of the two 32nd notes as a 16th note, right? Because two of them combined would be a 16th note. So in the blue here, I wrote the 8th note that we see. I've combined the two 32nd notes into a 16th note, and I kept this as a 16th note, right? So I took something that was like more unknown-ish, and I converted it into something that's more known. And then over here, I thought, oh, well, like an 8th note, that's pretty much like two 16th notes tied together, right? Their combined value. So that's comparable as well. So that's why I wrote it out that way. And once I did that, it turned into something that I knew and understood. It was really just a 4/3 polyrhythm again. Now, in terms of this, if it were a regular 4/3 polyrhythm, it would align like this. So the right hand, if this note were actually existent, which it's not, it would line up with this like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And you can see it's kind of spaced out unusually. And the left hand, the part where it's broken up in 3, we've got this like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But since no note is actually being played here, I did not think that drawing this line here would be necessary. So, but essentially I've taken something that is like pretty much an unknown and converted it into like a regular 4/3 polyrhythm. So, and then I had the lines match up in the same way as a regular 4/3 polyrhythm. Maybe I'll keep that line here just for reference. So again, in the regular 4/3, the right hand is broken up into 4 equal parts of 3, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? That's the stuff on the top here. And then the left hand is broken up into this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 3 equal parts of 4. And then we do have this note. Now this note, it's not part of the regular 4/3 polyrhythm, but I do need to account for the counting, like if we were actually to tap it out. And it's exactly halfway in between here and here. So, right, because it's splitting this area in half, of course. Therefore, logically, it's going to have to go between 8 and 9, right? So we've got sort of like 1.5 leading up to here and then 1.5 leading up to over there. So that's kind of how I've made sense of it. Now, this is just one way to start approaching it. You could end up like tapping the right hand rhythm with the right hand, left hand rhythm with the left hand. You can see like literally how exactly mathematically it breaks down. And it doesn't mean necessarily now that I've visually made sense of it, that I would just do this like super slow with this like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 1, and then gradually speed it up from there. That may not be the best solution in this case. I'm probably also going to just try playing right hand alone, left hand alone, record myself, play both of them together. Like I'll have to do some experimenting. I'll do some like really exact mathematical stuff, like what I was just showing you. But then I'll probably also record myself and listen back, make tiny adjustments. But in any case, my intention was just to show, how to compare something unknown to something known. So in your case, it may not be that you're comparing this really crazy polyrhythm with the 4 against, or this really crazy rhythm with the standard 4 against 3 polyrhythm. It might be that you're comparing something unknown to known in a much simpler instance. Many times students will have trouble, for instance, just with like tied notes, right? A note that was tied over from somewhere else, or like a long note, or like an ornament, for instance. And what I'll say here, even though it's not the main topic of this video, is that you should just remove those things. Like just remove the ties, remove the ornaments. Take something that it looks like you're not very familiar with and just replace it with something that you can actually play, right? Like, oh, I can't play this like grace note thing, this fancy ornament, but I could play it if those grace notes weren't there. So just play it that way. And then once you can do it, then add in the difficult stuff, right? Add the stuff back in. And you can make small adjustments back into the original thing. Well, I removed the ties, I removed the grace notes. Okay, now I can do it. This is something I can do. Now that I can do this, let me add back in the tie. Okay, now I can do it with the tie. Okay, now let me add back in the grace notes, maybe even one by one. All right, so you can gradually make your way back into what it originally was. And that might be the same type of thing that's done here. It's like maybe you can play it so that it's just a standard 4 against 3 polyrhythm, like I explained in the other video. And then you start to make adjustments. Like, okay, well, instead of playing the 4 against 3, I'm going to not play the first thing in the right hand because that's a tie. And then now I'm going to insert this extra note here, right? So that it's like a little bit different from a standard 4 against 3 polyrhythm. So you just got to take small steps towards that direction. And I think I'll just speak briefly about this other example here. So, this is pretty crazy too. I mean, I think that the arranger is just going out of his way to, I think this is an immense arrangement, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see here. So, yep. Okay. Well, he is a really amazing arranger, but I think he kind of goes out of his way to create complexity, but it's very pleasing to the ear. So in this, what I'm trying to show, again, it's not necessary that you can play this exact thing, this exact rhythm, but I'm just trying to decipher this little by little, right? So I don't think I marked it, but the quarter note, oh no, I did, okay. The quarter note beats, right? So you have to take something that's totally overwhelming and be like, okay, how do I orient myself? Let me create some landmarks or areas of orientation, right? So I can see this is like an 8th note and 2/16. So I'm going to put a quarter note marker here. And this is just like a nice little visual marker for myself. This is a little tiny circle. Nothing, this is not like a musical notation or anything. You could say it's something from my methodologies. But okay, so this is a quarter note, right? Even though it looks really crazy, it's just one quarter note from here to over there. All right, now these are 8th note triplets, 3 8th note triplets. They take the place of 2 8th notes, which takes the place of 1 quarter note. So I'll put another circle there. This looks pretty crazy or whatever, but this is just a quarter note, so I'll put a circle there. And then this is just a quarter note, even though that looks pretty crazy, so I'll just put a circle there. All right, so now I've divided the measure into quarters. And again, in your example, if you don't know how to do that, you could ask a teacher for help. You could, check online resources. But the point is to just at least put some markers such that, okay, I kind of know what's going on now. This is the first quarter of the measure. This is the second quarter of the measure. This is the third quarter. This is the last quarter, right? Okay, and now I did spirals for the eighth notes. So I'm like, okay, this is an eighth note, clearly. And then this, it's 2/16, so that equals an eighth note. So I'll put another eighth note marker over here. This is a little more complicated. I'm not going to go too much into this. You might have seen my 3 against 2 polyrhythm video. But suffice to say that I know that the eighth note markers will go here and here. This is halfway in between these two. I won't go into the exact reasoning this time, just for sake of time, but that's the way that it is. This is the beginning of the third beat. I'm able to identify this as the next eighth note marker. A little too complicated to explain in detail for sake of time, but I'm aware of that. And then this one is more visually obvious. You can see that this is like the first half of this area, and this is the second half. So these are the 2 eighth notes. We can also say, these are 30-second note quintuplets, and that takes the place of just 4 regular 30-second notes, which takes the place of 2 16th notes, which takes the place of 1 eighth note, right? So there's a way to reason it. So use your reasoning the best you can, and then, now we have those eighth note markers. And then these little blue things are like the 16th note markers. So, right? So the point is to take something complex, reduce it down so that you can orient yourself in larger sections, then to the extent that you can, reduce it down into even smaller sections, and you can kind of just go from there. In order to actually practice this, I would recommend, for instance, these parts, you could set the metronome to the 16th note pulse and gradually practice your way through this area, right? And it's going to get hopefully better and better. This is not so convenient to practice with the 16th note pulse, so I would skip that at first, right? So using my logical methodology, you could practice these parts and actually label here that you've solved like the first quarter, or you've solved these like eighths or something, right? So you can notate the areas that you've passed in this case. I guess this wouldn't be a quarter. This would actually be like an eighth. But basically the point is that you would practice these areas and indicate to yourself the sections you've played correctly. So you practice this area until it gets better and better with the 16th note pulse with the metronome. Here too, you can set the metronome, bum, 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 right? That's fairly straightforward with a 16th note pulse. Once this starts to get better, I would switch over to the eighth note pulse, like bum, 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 right? I would switch over this part to the eighth note pulse. And again, for sake of time, I won't go into the details, but then I could end up practicing the whole measure with the eighth note pulse. And so I needed to do these more with 16th notes. I needed to do something else, a preliminary step, before making it so that this part and this part, I can now practice the whole measure with the eighth note pulse, and then I can improve from there. So, what are the takeaways from that? You take something overwhelming, you simplify in large sections, then smaller, then still smaller, and so on. And you can also build up from there. So again, even if you can't play this particular rhythm, or it's not exactly even the same situation, you can think for instance, there's 4 sections or whatever that I've created. And sections 1 and 3, they require a lot more work and extra thinking and extra complicated thought processes in order to get to the same quality as sections 2 and 4, right? So I'll work on 1 and 3 first, resolve the rhythmic issues in sections 1 and 3, and then, now they're the same quality as 2 and 4. So now I can do all of the sections to the same quality, and then you can increase it from there. I find a lot of the time, instead of doing that, the student will just start at the beginning of the measure, and then if they can't get it or they can't link it with the next part, I mean, they'll just give up on the entire thing. It's also about identifying what it is that you can do, and not just giving up right there, right? Oh, I can't practice like this whole, like this is a great example of why one measure as an indivisible unit is so ridiculous, because that measure takes up like an entire line and is so complicated, right? This one measure is harder than like 8 measures in another piece. So instead of thinking, oh, one measure is the limit of how small I can go, or a half measure, or even a quarter measure, how about doing very tiny, minuscule little sections and then improving from there? And of course, it goes beyond the scope of this video to like literally solve that entire thing. But that's what, ongoing lessons are for, or that's what consulting an expert would be for. So yeah, so hopefully this was helpful / interesting. Again, my intention, just to reiterate one more time, is to try to teach modes of thinking, problem solving skills, critical thinking skills in this video. Not necessarily literally solving these rhythms, but hopefully you'll think outside the box and find some way that this can help in whatever sections that you're practicing. And if you're an advanced student, even better. So yeah, either way, hopefully it'll be useful. So yeah, please like, subscribe, let me know if you have thoughts, questions about videos to make and so on, and looking forward to next time.